Hello everyone, welcome back. I am Fer and this is the 10,000 subscriber Q&A.
Brought to you by my Patreons.
Luis Aldames asks, I want someone to explain how can the photon transmit the electromagnetic information at infinitely large distances when it has no information about charge at all. It's something that has my faith on quantum mechanics faltering. I can't understand that such a fundamental thing. Okay, if I can rephrase your question a little bit, I feel like that what you're asking is how can photons transmit the electromagnetic force when they have no electric charge? And I think this confusion comes because you have studied a bit of how the weak force and the strong force work, and you have seen that it's all about charges, right? There are different kinds of charges. There is color charge, there is weak charge, there is electric charge. And you have seen that for the strong and weak interactions, what happens is that these charges move around. And the movement of these charges is what creates, well, the symmetries of the force and what keeps particles together or behaving in some ways. And so maybe you studied that, you came to understand it, but now that you take that knowledge back to electrodynamics, which should be the easiest of the forces, you find that it doesn't work because the electric charges don't move around like the other kinds of charges. A particle has one kind of electric charge and it just doesn't change, it never changes. Photons just move and it seems they have nothing, they have no properties. Well, they have spin and energy, momentum, but they don't have any properties specific to that force. And so yeah, it might look very confusing, but I think that the solution is that you have to look at it from a simplest perspective. You have to somehow forget some of the things you've learned. Okay, so let me explain. I need like a string. Give me a second. Okay, so this is my computer charger, and I want you to think of it as a one-dimensional field. Okay? So now I'm gonna create some disturbances in this field by moving my hand up and down. To create these disturbances in the field, you need something with mass and energy to move on the field, right? But once the disturbance is created, once the wave is created, it moves on its own. Another example of this is when something falls in the water. Like this object falls and it creates waves. But the waves move away from the object, right? They move away on their own. So the same is happening in electromagnetism. You have this electromagnetic field, imagine this is the electromagnetic field, and you have electrical charges, and when they move, they create disturbances in this field. They create waves. But of course, once the wave is created, it moves away on its own. It doesn't need to have electrical charge to propagate through the field. And the same can happen but backwards. Okay, so for example, now what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna play this backwards, but the audio is still forward, so it probably looks like a little bit weird. But the point is that now you can see how the disturbance reaches my hand and moves it, right? It is the same process, but just backwards, forwards and backwards. So that's what's happening in electromagnetism. Either you have charges that create disturbances in the field, or you have disturbances in the field that move the charges, right? It is the same thing. And so that's how photons can propagate and interact with the electromagnetic field, despite having no electric charge. But now the problem is, well, what's going on with the other forces? The ones that have that their particles do have charges, like the W bosons or the gluons. Well, what's going on is that these are different kinds of waves we are not very used to in our everyday lives. Because the waves we are used to are waves that pass through each other, right? What you have never seen is a wave that changes the direction of another wave. Maybe they can have interference effects. They can have constructive interference or destructive interference, but they never change the direction of another wave, right? For example, you can have the light of one lantern crossing the light of another lantern, no problem. You can have two different sounds coming from two different parts in the room. They don't affect each other. You can have waves in the water, they cross each other just fine. But when you have in the weak and strong forces, these waves in this field can crash with each other, or they can at least affect the direction of other waves. They can have interactions that are more complex than just constructive and destructive interference. And the way we model, or the way we understand those higher levels of interactions, is by saying that these waves have charges, that they have the substance that created them, which is weird. But yeah, those are different kinds of ways which we don't usually encounter in our everyday lives. But who knows, maybe there is some example out there in our everyday lives of a kind of wave that behaves this way. I'm just not sure, but if someone knows, please tell me in the comments. It would be interesting to know if you can come up with any examples of this that people can have, so that they can better understand the difference between these different kinds of waves. That was a simplified explanation, but I hope it gives you back your confidence in quantum mechanics. I wouldn't say faith, because I think I wouldn't use the word faith when talking about science, but yeah, I expect that this gives you back your confidence that quantum mechanics is a really good description of reality. Topic I asks, how are you so knowledgeable on so many topics? I am currently in my master's studies, but I always feel really stupid when I go online and see other people who are well versed in a lot of topics. Maybe I should not go online anymore? Sorry for the rant. Did not know who else I should talk to. First of all, thank you for talking about this, because these are the kinds of problems that we need to talk about in order to have a shot at solving them. And second, congratulations on being accepted to this master's program. It must not have been easy, and I'm pretty sure they don't accept stupid people, so I'm pretty sure you are not stupid. But the problem is that we humans are beings of reason and feeling. So sometimes we can feel things even though we know they are irrational, right? So in this case you have objective proof that you are not stupid, but you still feel that way. And so the advice I'm gonna give you is from what I've learned from Dr. K in the channel Healthy Gamer GG. And of course, like, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not nearly as good at this as Dr. K, but you ask me, so I'm gonna give my best shot, but you should check out his channel for much better advice. And so I think that the problem here is that you are comparing yourself to other people, right? To these strangers on the internet that seem so very knowledgeable. But the first thing you should realize is that these people in the internet seem very knowledgeable precisely because they are making videos about all the things they know. And so this vision you have of them is a distorted version of reality. I suspect that if you met me, you would realize that I'm not smarter than anyone else. And that would be true of all these people you see on the internet. So that's the problem. You are not comparing yourself to real people. You are comparing yourself to these images of people you have from what little you have seen of them on the internet. And so, of course, you always come short, because you are comparing yourself to distorted versions of reality. And so, what should you do? I think trying to be smart is a good goal. I think that you should, if that's what you want to do, you should try to be smarter. But you should not compare yourself to these other people. You should compare yourself to yourself. So you should try to be smarter than you were yesterday. You should try to learn more. And as long as you are doing that, you are advancing, you are doing some real progress. And also, like, the vision you have of yourself has to be better than this vision you have of these strangers on the internet, because no one knows you better than yourself. Keep in mind, this vision you have of yourself could still be distorted, but I still imagine it would be a better guide than just some random YouTube videos. And so that's the thing. Just try to be just better than you yourself were yesterday. And also keep in mind that if you are trying your hardest and you are not making any progress, or you are not making progress as fast as you want, it could be very disheartening, right? But here's the thing. Remember that what you owe to yourself is your best effort. If you're doing your best effort, then you have no reason to beat yourself over not having the results you want. So it's perfectly fine to feel bad about not having good results. It's just these bad emotions shouldn't include guilt nor blame towards yourself, right? It can include some other negative emotions that are appropriate to that frustration that you feel. Just not attacking yourself for not being good enough or something like that. And it's difficult, but I hope you get there, and I hope you get at a place where you feel better about yourself. And of course, like, go to Dr. K's channel to get much better advice on this topic and many more. Schnock3627 says, "Hi there, I recently had an entrance exam and didn't perform well, especially in math and physics, which are my favorite subjects, despite how much I love them. I struggle to perform well on tests, which is making me feel demotivated. Have you ever been in a similar situation? If so, do you have any tips or advice on how to regain my motivation and improve my test-taking skills?" I have been in that situation. Many times, actually. The first time I was in this situation was when I was taking my test for mathematical physics. I don't know if they have this class in other universities, but basically the idea is that it's an introduction to the mathematics you are going to need in other more advanced courses like general relativity, quantum mechanics, stuff like that. And as you can imagine, it is some of the most advanced math you are going to use in your physics degree. And I prepared really hard for this exam. I read all the books, I did all the exercises, I made sure I understood everything. I felt really confident. And yet, when I got to the exam, I didn't know anything. It felt like the exam was written in another language. That's a joke or a meme I had seen before, but I had never experienced it. And yeah, it really did feel like it was written in a foreign language because of how little I understood the questions. And I felt just so bad that my best effort wasn't enough, that I actually ended up crying. Well, I managed to hold out until I finished the exam and I left the room and I went somewhere else in the campus, and then I started crying because I just felt so bad. And I felt really bad for a couple of days, but eventually I realized that it's fine. It's fine if your best effort isn't enough sometimes. That just means you have to try again. You have to become better, and eventually your best effort will be enough. But it's obviously really difficult to get to that point, right? And so for this reason, you need to realize that hope is like a muscle. Hope is like a muscle that you can strengthen. And the way you strengthen it is with passion, right? You say you love these topics, you love physics, you love mathematics, that's great. That passion has to fuel you, has to give you hope, has to give you the determination to keep on trying, has to make you resilient. I love the word resilience. This is what you need. And as you do this, as you rely on your passion to say, no, I'm gonna try again, and I'm gonna keep on trying until I succeed, then your hope becomes stronger and you become able to weather stronger and stronger beatings, ever more, to resist bigger failures, right? And you have to realize that having failed doesn't mean that you are a failure, right? You can keep on trying. And you can also be stoic about this, because Stoics used to say that for everything that happens in life, there are two outcomes. Either it kills you or it doesn't. If it kills you, it's not your problem anymore. And if it didn't kill you, you live another day, you can try again, right? And so, yeah, just let your passion drive you. Let your passion strengthen your hope and give you resilience. And eventually, your best effort will be enough. Because each of us are stronger than we realize. And so you will find your strength, I promise. Now, I have one more piece of advice on taking tests, and that's don't do an all-nighter. Don't do an all-nighter the night before the exam. Maybe do an all-nighter 3 days before the exam or something like that. If you want to do it, it's fine. But never before the exam. Because not having rested, if you haven't slept all night and you go do the exam, it's just gonna worsen everything you had already learned. It's not gonna help you. And I understand the impulse for doing an all-nighter. You want to compensate for all the effort you feel you didn't put in. But I find it better to just at some point say, well, I've just learned everything I could learn, and that's it. I'm not gonna learn anything more before the exam. And so I always have this commitment of sleeping at like 10 or 10:30 or 11 at most before an important exam. And just go well rested with the exam. Go with the knowledge that you managed to acquire and do your best. And so yeah, just sleep well before an exam. One of the most important advices I can give you. David Van de Veers asks, have you made any new discoveries? No, but I do have one interesting hypothesis that I want to share with you guys. However, I do need to give a word of warning before that. Because Whenever you make a science video in YouTube, inevitably you're gonna find these people who claim to have solved all of physics and everyone else is wrong, or it's a conspiracy to hide X and Y, stuff like that. And I don't want to be part of that conversation. And in fact, I suspect that some of these people may have schizophrenia or some other mental illness, in which case I don't blame them. They didn't choose to get ill. But I do think that a good scientist is always open to the idea that they are wrong, right? A good scientist never claims that, oh, I have found the truth and here it is and everyone else is wrong. No. So what I'm going to present you here is a hypothesis. It's not even a theory, because a theory requires a high standard of evidence. So this is just a hypothesis, and I'm perfectly open to the idea that this is wrong. But I do think this idea is interesting enough to share. Okay, so here's how it goes. Right now, we know of 12 particles, and these particles have a set of properties. They have their masses, they have their spins, and they have their charges. They can have electric charge, they can have weak hypercharge, they can have color charge, or they can have weak isospin, which is also a kind of charge, right? And so at some point I learned that there's another way to represent color charge. Usually the way we represent color charge is with a vector with 3 elements, right? And each of the elements is the probability to detect one of the colors. Fine. But you can also represent color charge using 2 quantum numbers, which are confusingly named color hypercharge and color isospin. And this description of color charge is perfectly equivalent to the one using the vectors. And so the one with the vectors is preferred because it's just so much simpler mathematically. But the fact that we could represent this in this other way was just intriguing to me. Like, I felt there was something about it, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And then I started thinking about electroweak unification. This is a theory developed in the 70s, and it says a lot of stuff, but among them it says that electric charge is the combination of weak isospin and weak hypercharge. And so I started thinking if maybe other charges were other combinations of different kinds of spin and charges. Eventually the floodgates opened and I arrived at this idea. I think that maybe in the universe, before any of the symmetries were broken, all particles had 10 different properties, and all of these properties behaved like spin one half, which means that their allowed values were 1/2 or -1/2. And then as the universe cooled down, these different properties were mixed together in different ways, and this resulted in color charge, in weak isospin, in weak hypercharge, and eventually in electric charge. And yeah, this is a theory I like a lot. Obviously I came up with it, of course I like it. I'm biased in that sense. I have tried to explain this idea to other scientists, but they don't seem very impressed by this. And so what I've been trying to do is to learn more quantum field theory, learn more group theory, so that I can ground these ideas more, so that I can present them in a more rigorous way. And maybe I'll find, maybe the result is that I'll see why these ideas are wrong and that makes sense, and that's fine. That's how science works, right? Or maybe I'll come up with something consistent and I will be able to present this, and I don't know, maybe someday people will be able to do an experiment that proves that this is wrong. Or it's even possible, but it's a long shot. There will be experiments that will prove some of it, which would be amazing, right? But let me say once again that a good scientist is always open to the idea of being wrong, and they are never defensive about their theories. Or at least we shouldn't be. Sometimes it's hard because we're human, but we should remember that that's the goal. Don't accept that you could be wrong, and don't be defensive about your theories, right? And so, well, anyway, that's what I hope one day to have discovered. Ryan Marcus 3738 asks, do you think self-replicators will be viable by 2050? If so, how do you think they would be used? I think that 2050 is It's actually a long time. I think they will be available much sooner, seeing as how fast artificial intelligence is developing. I mean, many of the things we have now, I would have considered them science fiction just like 10 years ago. It's crazy. And so, but the thing is, okay, so if we have self-replicators, how do we use them, right? I think that a good way to use self-replicators is to have them become something else. So let me explain. I think maybe we can use them to make buildings. For example, let's say that you have an empty lot in a city. You fill this lot with all the resources you need to construct a building, and then you put one self-replicator there. And the self-replicator will start using these resources to make more of itself. Maybe you program it so that it cannot go outside this allotted area, because self-replicators could be very dangerous. Anyway, so and it starts creating more and more of itself, and it is programmed that when it reaches a certain number of copies of itself, then it stops creating more, and all of these copies arrange themselves in such a way that they form a new building. And I think that that's pretty cool. And so, or maybe not a building, but a factory, or an airplane, or I don't know, whatever you need to build, you could have these self-replicators create many copies of themselves and then arrange into that thing. I think that's how we would use self-replicators, but I don't know, maybe I lack imagination and there are so much better and more creative uses. But I don't know, it will be exciting to find out. 4984 Christian asks, how do I world build the necessary elements so I could tell a story with many details? How can I do this but without getting into every detail everywhere? Like, let's say economics or politics or culture. I don't want to design every politician just to find out how the world works. But what is the minimum I need to do for every aspect of the world so that the system can connect? Okay, so if I understood correctly, what you want is to come up with this fantasy world that is very detailed and very believable, but you don't want to have to imagine every single person living in it. So how can you make it feel very detailed without having to create all the details? Well, you can do something that I'm gonna call rendering world building, which is how video games work. Let's say that when you're playing a video game, like, I don't know, Horizon Zero Dawn or something like that, you see all of these beautiful forests and mountains and rivers, and it looks amazing. But the secret is that as you move the camera around, the only things that exist is what you are looking at in that moment, and the game stops rendering everything you are not seeing. Okay, well, maybe if there are enemies nearby or something and you turn around, they are still being rendered. But for the most part, as soon as the playable character stops interacting with something, it stops existing to save on resources. Another example is in Minecraft. Technically, you are on the ground and everything below doesn't exist. It hasn't been rendered until you start digging. At that point, the game starts creating everything, creating the illusion that it was there all along, but it wasn't. All of those blocks only existed because you started digging. One example of this kind of world building would be the mouth of Sauron in The Lord of the Rings. This is a character that doesn't appear in the movies, but basically he is the second in command of Sauron. And so you expect him to be like an orc or a Nazgul or some other kind of monster, but no, he's just a dude. Sure, he's a dude that has been maybe distorted by black magic or something like that, but he is a human. He was just a regular person at some point, and then through choices he made in his life, he ended up becoming the second in command of Sauron. And so that's incredible. That's one of these details that hints at so much more. Like, you can look into the distance and try to imagine how was the life of this guy, and try to imagine like how does this work, right? But that's the secret. All the details for that, they don't exist. If the story had gone in such a direction that the mouth of Sauron became more relevant, then Tolkien could have started digging into the details, making it seem like they were always there, right? But of course, that wasn't necessary. The mouth of Sauron is not a very relevant character for the rest of the plot, so much so that it was cut from the movies and nothing changed. But that's an example of what you can do. Just have a lot of details in your story that hint at more things, but you don't have to develop those other details unless your story moves in that direction. Ontolog5879 says, "Hi, thanks for what you share on YouTube, I really like it. My question is, how does linguistics, and more especially semantics, can be a tool for logic and ontology?" Another question, what is the best book, website, online seminar to begin linguistics? Okay, I'm gonna answer the second question first because it's much easier. And if you want to learn about linguistics, the best resources online are channels like Artifexian, Biblaridium, Worldbuilding Notes, Jan Misalik, Sidnaf. I love the online linguistics community. It's a small community, but it's very passionate and it's very nice. Also, Tom Scott also has some videos on linguistics. And so, yeah, check their channels, check everything they have said about linguistics. It's really entertaining, really informative. And I think pretty much all of them at some point have book recommendations, maybe in the description of their videos or at the end of their videos. And so yeah, go to their channels, watch their videos, and when you find a topic that you find interesting, check what the books they recommend about it, and then read those books. So yeah, that's how I recommend getting into linguistics. But how semantics can be a tool for ontology. Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, ontology is like the philosophical study of being. In that case, I'm not sure studying semantics tells us anything about the being, like being philosophically. It can tell us about what we know about beings, but that's more like epistemology, right? I think languages can tell us a lot about how we learn and what we know, but that's etymology. Like, maybe I lack imagination, but I don't see how we can use linguistics to learn about ontology. So yeah, but maybe I'm wrong. And if you do know, if you can come up with some way that linguistics could inform us about ontology, please let me know in the comments. I'm finding this question fascinating. GamerDo Dimanche 1456 asks, do you know the channel Jan Misali? He does videos on lots of things, but he's got well known for doing conlang reviews. Would you do a collab with him on the Phyrexian language? I do know Jan Misali. I've been subscribed to his channel since he had less than 1,000 subscribers, and I've been watching all of his videos. It was so crazy that someone was actually doing reviews of conlangs. So specific. Honestly, seemed like it was made for me specifically. And so for that reason, I would be really happy to do a collaboration with Jan Misali about the Phyrexian language. I'm just not sure if we know enough about the Phyrexian language for him to do a review on it. But yeah, it would be really cool. So Jan Misali, if you're watching this and you want to do a collab, just let me know, send me an email, let's see what happens. And that's it. I want to thank you guys so much for 10,000 subscribers. I never thought I would reach this point. And yeah, thanks for watching and goodbye.
I have to pay $268 in student debt each month, and my Patreons help me a lot with that. And for that reason, I have to give special thanks to Automotion, Carlo Facioli, T. Highfield, Valerie Hyde, and my newest Patreon, Alec Luman. All my Patreons, thanks 1,000 times, thanks a million times.